Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 12 of the School Transportation Nation podcast. I'm Tony Corbin, the publisher of School Transportation News, and this episode is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. Our tech tip today is brought to you by Zonar, and our safety tip is brought to you by SafeFleet.
Thanks for joining us, friends. I'm Ryan Gray, Editor-in-Chief of School Transportation News. Today, we're also going to be joined by our good friend and past NAPT President, Alexandra Robinson.
Excellent. Super excited to hear what Alex has to say, Ryan. She's always a speaker at our conferences. The classes are always packed. Ryan, why don't you give us some updates on what is going on in the news? What did we hear from this past week?
Sure. Well, some troubling news coming out of North Carolina, where the state legislature last week approved a bill to redirect school transportation funds to local universities. So higher education standing to benefit from school buses. We've been talking a lot about state budgets the last couple of weeks, a lot of deficits being run because of the effects of the COVID-19 disease that comes from this new coronavirus. The problem is here that there's a rampant unemployment as well that has really been draining state coffers. So some states running some huge deficits. North Carolina, one of them, and everyone is looking to see where they can find funds. There has been a lot of talk in some states about trying to protect education budgets, as well as, hopefully the effect of the CARES Act that's supposed to infuse a lot of money to K through 12 education to help with some of those expenses. But the news out of North Carolina, where they're looking to grab school bus money, that's got to be really disconcerting. The state reportedly has $40 million in reserve funding for school busing, at least that's according to some legislative notes, which prompted this move as they're looking to try to stop the bleeding at their state universities. This bill was sent to Governor Roy Cooper for signature. At this recording, it had not been signed, so we'll wait to see where that goes. Another one of the reasons why they're targeting the school bus money is because they're citing quote unquote less wear and tear on school buses, resulting from many of them being parked during these school closures. We'll have an article up on stnonline.com about this. Look for it. We'll be looking to provide some answers.
Ryan, it was my understanding, though, the money was for replacement of school buses that were 20 years or older. So I would say there's probably been a lot of wear and tear over 20 years. So I'm not sure the thought process on that. It seems kind of short-sighted, but I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, that's legislators for you. They don't know the specifics or even how school transportation works in their states. That's one of the things that we'll be looking for some guidance, hopefully, from this industry task force, the STARTS task force.
Yeah, very good. What other things are going on? There's some news out in New York.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of news out of New York lately, but one of the more encouraging pieces is that an architectural firm is looking to use school buses that many of which have been kind of like what's being claimed in North Carolina, sitting and not running for the past several months because of all the school closures, using those buses as shells for mobile testing sites against COVID-19. So obviously a lot of testing has ramped up in the last couple of months. Most of these are these drive-through testing centers that are erected in parking lots or, of malls and whatnot. But what these architects cite is that that's not very equitable to a lot of people who don't have vehicles. What do? So they got the idea of retrofitting some of these school buses, or at least adding some equipment into them and being able to drive them out into communities that don't have very good access to these testing sites. So that's some encouraging news, at least from a standpoint of utilizing school buses in a different way. And anything that gets school buses out into the community and shows them working to the greater good has got to be viewed as a win.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, Ryan, if they do COVID-19 testing on those school buses, I'm betting they're going to have to do a lot of cleaning and disinfecting on those school buses too. And I think you're working on an editorial for our July edition, and you're talking to a lot of different people in the industry about that subject. You want to enlighten our audience a little bit?
Sure. So I've been doing all the research you can imagine and then some about disinfectants. And it's not just folks in the school bus industry. It's also talking to a lot of what we would consider household cleaners or companies that manufacture these products. So like the Cloroxes of the world and the Purells and Lysol and whatnot. We've heard so much from transportation departments on Facebook or just casual conversations or even articles about what they're doing to try to address the COVID-19 virus, as well as other human coronaviruses in the bus. Let's not forget the flu, right? One of the things that I've been doing is I've been looking at, okay, what's the difference between cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting? So as you mentioned, the article will be in our July issue, so look for that. But a sneak peek is that the school bus OEMs and a lot of suppliers are expressing a lot of concern about the effect of these disinfectants that are being used in school buses. Because again, like a lot of other things, there's very little guidance. The CDC does have a lot of information about utilizing disinfectants in schools, especially to fight viruses and the flu and whatnot. There is also a lot of information from the EPA, even the FDA, because they're the ones that regulate a lot of these products. So I've learned that the EPA is actually responsible for approving surface disinfectants. So that's what we're talking a lot about here in terms of the school bus world. What is safe to use? What is not only safe for you have a bunch of children on the bus, you don't want to have noxious fumes in the bus, but also what are the unintended consequences of perhaps using something that causes a chemical reaction that corrodes belt buckles or breaks the plastics inside that could lead to system failure. So really jumping into that, having a whole bunch of conversations about the different solutions that have been used for decades in the transit world that now have applicability in the school bus world. Really, the whole conversation has been that before, in terms of cleaning school buses, a lot of it was to address, of course, if there was an accident on the bus, if one of the children had an accident or there was a bodily fluid cleanup that needed to be done. A lot of school districts have rules against eating on the school bus. Others don't. So, of course, you could have those kind of things. But a lot of the cleaning was really, sweeping the bus at the end of the week, washing it, of course, to make it look nice. But in this whole era of COVID-19, until we get a vaccine, at least, it's taken this whole new life. So digging into that, stay tuned. It should be a pretty enlightening piece. It certainly enlightened me. There's a lot of products out there. So again, which are appropriate for a school bus and which are not. There's a lot of homework to do.
Yeah, Ryan, really interesting stuff. I think the big conversation, too, is people I hear of using foggers or other things like that. How does that affect the camera systems? How does that affect GPS systems, other onboard electronics? I don't know if that's honestly been tested. If school buses go from being cleaned once a month to being cleaned 2-3 times a day, what about that? What's that kind of degradation or that effect potentially? We don't know, right? And what are the unintended consequences? But speaking of technology, here's today's tech tip from Zonar, a leader in smart fleet management. Summer planning is in full swing. Future-proof your driver's devices with mobile ecosystem that'll withstand the test of time. Rugged tablets ready to run on 4G. A library of tried and tested apps for extra functionality. Integrated inspection and maintenance streams. Expand driver capability now for fewer disruptions down the road. Plan for tomorrow today. Learn more at zonarsystems.com/restart. That's zonarsystems.com/restart. Ryan, what are the latest from the states on reopening plans?
Well, we've been doing some research on that. And actually, and now that you ask, we have a resource up on our website. So if you go to stnonline.com, head down to the footer, so the bottom of the homepage. On the bottom right, there will be some links under resources. Click on safety resources, and you can go in there and you can see where we currently stand, updating that as we learn of guidance. So certainly if you don't see your state listed, but you know that there has been official guidance released, email Taylor Hannon, our associate editor, who's done tons of research on this, at taylor@stnonline.com and let her know where to look. Now, again, there's a lot of draft guidelines maybe that are not public yet. Some of them have been released publicly. So I think the last I looked, there was over 20 states that had officially released some kind of guidance, at least publicly. That's a big part of what we're looking at. And a lot have similarities. I think you can tell a lot of states are looking at each other, and certainly what CDC has said and some of the state associations. What's jumping out to us is there's a lot on these different guidelines or recommendations, of course, about social distancing on the bus and at bus stops. One of the things that has jumped out to me in several of these guidance documents is that if social distancing is not possible on the school bus, make sure students are wearing masks. And certainly on the surface there, most people are thinking of that. And we actually asked a survey question recently if districts are looking at requiring students to have masks, or even if they're going to be supplying them, and a lot are. But one of the things that jumped out to me was, does this perhaps give some wiggle room to school districts to say, hey, you know what? Social distancing is not possible, either on the school bus or at the school bus stop. So does that in any way affect some of the things that we've been hearing about limiting certain number passenger capacity buses to a fraction of the full capacity? Maybe, maybe not. Certainly, I'm not a lawyer and don't take anything I say as legal advice. But we know from our past coverage of the funding of school bus contracts, or the lack of funding those contracts in certain states or certain districts, that school attorneys have really ripped apart language contained in the CARES Act, as well as various governor executive orders that directed school districts to continue paying on their contracts, that they said, hey, this is not feasible, so we're not going to do it. Is this something that we're going to see with some of these state recommendations, guidelines? Because again, most of them are recommendations. A lot of these school districts in various states still have the discretion to do what they need to do, make their own decision. So like I said, you can go to our website and check out what we have so far, but it's really been enlightening, just showing a lot of the issues that student transporters have to grapple with. And tied to that, of course, is the Industry Starts Task Force that was formed in May. And it actually, according to a webinar that NAPT, NSTA, and NASDIPS aired last week, that those conversations predated COVID-19 actually earlier this year. But, when looking at school reopening, this task force is really designed to try to cut through a lot of the noise that we're hearing, or some of the hastily made decisions at state levels or even the federal level, and really iron out what's possible, what's feasible as the experts in the industry, right? A lot of these, like we were talking about what's happening in North Carolina, a lot of times these states legislators or governors or whatever make these decisions about school transportation, but they are misinformed or just certainly don't have the full story. So the reason behind this task force, as we've reported, has been to lend credibility to these plans by saying, hey, we're the student transporters, we're the experts. This is how much it's going to cost. This is what's going to mean to state or district budgets if we have to do these additional routes and runs to address social distancing. So really, it's actionable items that school districts can use and implement. So this webinar, it kind of let us peek behind the curtain, if you will, a little bit on what they're working on. And the work is cut out for them. They're supposed to have a final report and the first set of items, at least, by the beginning of July. So that's merely, weeks away. And one of the things they're doing is they're taking the approach of making this sortable and specific to different school districts, so that they can essentially look at this document and see themselves, see their operations reflected in it. So they're looking at breaking down their recommendations by urban school districts, suburban, those located in small towns or cities, and rural. And then they're also looking at existing bell tier structures and how some routes are run, so that school districts can dive down and find the items that best reflect how they do business. Give them information that they need. And now the task force came out and said, hey, we know that with this timeline of getting this information out, some school districts might not be able to use it because they've already had to move ahead and plan. But they're just trying to get as much information out as fast as they can, intelligible information that really fills in the holes, because there are a lot of those in all these guidance documents.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, I know we've been working really hard on many articles on our website. Taylor Hannon, one of our crack editorial team members, put up an article, no easy button available to student transporters in response of coronavirus, right? I mean, and there's other ones about integrating your health professional like nurses. Are they in the conversation? I've been seeing a lot of chatter in social media on that particular article. So definitely check out the STN website for all the coronavirus coverage. And, as schools restart, there's a lot of news out there, a lot of information. So, kind of take it in little bites. There's just so much going on. We just received some really brand new news from TransFinder that your district may qualify to open fall 2020 with the most powerful web-based routing solution, Route Finder Plus. Experts all agree one of the best ways to manage reopening out of the pandemic is to use routing software that provides features such as what-if scenarios, calendar-based routing, and smart sequencing. TransFinder is making this opportunity available for just 2 more weeks, so you have to act now by emailing getplus@transfinder.com. That's getplus@transfinder.com. Don't forget to put in the subject line STN Podcast to be entered in to win an Amazon gift card. Plus, TransFinder will make a donation to our favorite charity. Again, email getplus@transfinder.com. Route Finder Plus is faster, safer, and smarter, so you can be too. Don't go anywhere. You won't want to miss our guest, Alex Robinson, talking about how school buses can help provide equal access to education that all students deserve.
We're back and happy to be joined by Alexandra Robinson. She is an industry consultant as well as past president of the National Association for Pupil Transportation. Alex, how are you doing today?
I am great, Ryan. Thanks, you guys, for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and get more perspective on what's going on out there in the industry. You have so much expertise in operations, transportation, child behavior. You see all these state guidelines coming out. Are there some big surprises that are jumping out to you?
That's a great question. I think the biggest surprise that I've seen kind of across the board has to do with the fact that lots of people are speaking about structural considerations, cleaning, routing, timing, scheduling, of course, all important. But I don't hear a lot of the practical personal parts, such as mental health, the human piece, the questions that obviously students, especially students with special needs, students with disabilities, are going to ask. For example, like the ideas about children wearing masks, when many cases students have tactical sensitivity issues and don't want anything touching their face, let alone a mask. Talking about the same kids who may not want to finger paint or use finger paint because they don't want to get their fingers dirty. Also a little bit surprised at the rush rather than focus on maybe the support personnel and how they can assist. Considerations about special education, including education miss and how online learning, lack of special education interaction really affects a child with a disability. Even those who are the most withdrawn still look to their teacher or paraeducator, aide, bus monitor, bus attendant, etc. And I don't see a lot of guidance on how the assistants, how the support personnel, some people would consider school bus driver support personnel, but I'm a little bit disappointed I haven't seen too much of that.
And certainly something that we plan to address at our TSD conference in Indianapolis in October. Of course, was supposed to be in March and got postponed. Alex, you are one of our tenured faculty members, so you will be a part of those conversations. So we're developing that all right now. Of course, a big COVID-19 flare to all our conferences this year, but specifically what you were just mentioning, Alex. So with that, obviously we're talking about equity, right? School bus has often been promoted as a tool of equity, but you really see that being affected going forward, especially, with all these recommendations and how COVID-19 is changing the landscape?
I do. I think in terms of how we are looking to staff and or in some cases restaff our buses, but also just looking in terms of who actually has access to the seats, especially if the seats are limited, and how is that communication getting to the parents who need it. Even during some of the online classroom, Zoom meetings, whatever that you see kids having right now, I haven't seen a lot of, getting back again, students with disabilities, as well as maybe students who don't have the same access, having somebody actually just come on. They look to their teachers, they look to their bus drivers as their educators, as their mentors, and the people to whom they're going to ask questions. And I haven't seen them maybe just getting online with them and saying, it's a good morning. Are you ready to start school today? Let's go brush your teeth and get ready, that type of thing. And I don't know, especially if kids are being not supervised as much, or if their parents are a little bit done with the online thing, which I totally understand. But I think that the equity in terms of, just like it's difficult to distance learn, it's difficult for many students especially students who maybe are withdrawn, to even be on a bus where there's more space between them. Maybe that's the only social interaction that they have. Really, there's a lot of equity questions and answers we can talk about. But I think districts requiring to do certain things almost in a rush to get it going may overlook certain parents, may overlook certain students. So that transparency and the information needs to get out by any means possible, even though kids have the at-home laptops or Chromebooks or whatever to learn, doesn't mean that all of the information is getting to parents, all parents or guardians in a timely manner.
So amid all this COVID-19 stuff, unfortunately, we've seen it take a backseat these past couple of weeks to the ongoing systemic racism that's really been a fabric of our nation since its inception. It's been there and it really shone a light on the continued problems in our nation and the world, really. And from that, I've seen a lot of calls nationwide to make schools and education a safe haven from racism. But are they forgetting the school bus?
Absolutely, I think they are. I know that, as I said, many students, they're coming onto that school bus to meet and see maybe the one or two consistent adults that they see on a routine basis. I think we are forgetting about how we vet. Listen, our drivers and attendants may have some sort of anti-discrimination training because it's required by law, but this isn't really a time to be divided about all that. It's really a time for us to get together and really look to how are we vetting the people who transport our students. What are we doing to help them understand their own bias and understand that any sort of perception like that is not allowed and certainly has no place on the school bus, and students have to feel safe. I do think we're forgetting about that. We've talked a lot about the school bus being an extension of the classroom. I always have. And as an educator myself, because I'm still in transportation as an educator, I think, as are everybody else in transportation, I think we need to look at anti-bias training that doesn't always exist with our drivers, our employees, teachers. And our teachers, parents, students come with built-in biases from their experience. Somehow we need to get that and get rid of preconceived notions, but also train for how to spot our own biases. So this definitely isn't a time for us to be worried about where we're going to find that. We're kind of calling on our industry to talk about what we can do next, and cleaning of the buses and rerouting and spacing and all of that is super important. And I'm not, diminishing that at all. But you have kids who are coming on the bus who are going to ask questions. Where were we? What did we do? Were you sick? I didn't have food. Are the drivers, attendants going to be prepared to answer those questions? Or, I marched in a protest, or my mom got mad, or my dad wasn't here, or all of those things. How do we answer those questions as adults? Because, our children are always watching us.
You're also well known throughout the industry for leadership training that you provide and that you are a part of. These times especially require leaders to step up to the plate. That's kind of what I'm hearing you say here. But, without beating a dead horse, the ones that often command much of the industry's attention are noticeably male and white. Another hat that you wear in the industry is you really helped form the group Women in Transportation. One of the things that your group did in 2015 at the National Congress on School Transportation, was really being instrumental in getting a resolution passed that not only recognizes the role women play and have played in this industry, but also calling on industry groups to make decisions about the 2020 steering committee that reflect current diversity of the industry. Now, of course, the NCST was supposed to be in May. It was canceled and rescheduled for next year. But based upon that work that you and your group have done, in your estimation, what work remains to be done in light of the global protests against racism and the death of George Floyd and everything that we're dealing with right now? How should this resolution extend to all marginalized voices?
Well, at the National Congress in Iowa, it was very specific to addressing all of those things. Granted, women, growing minority in our industry, especially if you include bus drivers, but not the leads or chairs of many or any, in some cases, of our committees. And so women certainly is one of those minorities, luckily much more growing minority. The other thing that we also mentioned in that resolution, our daily operations should reflect the population of those we transport, regardless of gender and race. And not only do we need to have a voice, there should be an active recruitment to get leaders to the table, especially if there hasn't been a seat at the table before, at that table. I don't think that anybody should be confused. There will always be school districts, departments that are doing a certain thing. But if we're educators, then we should be constantly learning. We should be taking a look at whose voice hasn't been heard, whose perspective hasn't been heard, just like we've done before with large urban districts, small districts. Same with the bus, and same with, men certainly can be nurturers as women. Oftentimes, though, the woman is the nurturer and the person who's doing that online training at home and teaching, as well as the job and everything else. And it just seems kind of odd in 2020 that we're still having this conversation. But the resolution did point out that not only our steering committees, that other committees and other voices should be heard. Black people, people of color, everybody who is in this industry. And again, who are our children looking at when they get on a bus? Do they see a familiar face? Do they see a person with a disability because they have a disability? And I think we've forgotten about that a little bit. So WIT is right now basically an Instagram and a Facebook page, but we are in a position to certainly create that anti-bias training if it doesn't exist. And we're excited to do that.
And certainly WIT's a great partner of ours, helps us put together the rodeo at TSD. So without the expertise of all those ladies and gentlemen that are a part of that group, we couldn't do it without you. So Alex, we couldn't have done this podcast without you. So thank you so much for being with us and exposing our minds, our ears to these very important topics that the entire industry needs to really take hold of.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. You guys have a great day.
Thanks, Ryan and Alex, for those insightful thoughts and discussion. Always great to get a fresh perspective on the podcast. Also want to share with this week our safety tip from Seon, a Safe Fleet brand. School is just around the corner. Are you ready? Turn up the volume. As many students will be excited to get back to school and see their friends, remind them to slow down and watch out for oncoming traffic. With Safe Fleet's predictive stop arm technology, you're able to easily increase the volume and even change the messaging. Seon's team have been busy connecting with hundreds of school districts, providing safety solutions for back to school in a world with COVID-19. Check out seon.com/COVID. That's this week's safety tip, brought to you by Seon, a Safe Fleet brand committed to driving safety forward. I want to extend a special thank you to our sponsors, TransFinder, Zonar, and Safe Fleet. We appreciate all of you. We greatly appreciate our listeners. You guys are everything to us, and we really appreciate you tuning in today. You can stream, subscribe, and share this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite streaming platform. Be sure to check out our website, stnonline.com, so you can stay updated on all the latest news and discussion on school transportation and COVID-19. And also, don't forget to register for STN Expo Reno and or Indianapolis, as well as the TSD conference. Visit stnexpo.com. Stay safe and well, and we'll see you next time.